Well, thanks for the intro, Claire. I'd say math. um, I'm Tomas. I'm the CEO of Hereworks, as Claire mentioned, and Hereworks is a master systems integrator, and we've, I suppose, helped deliver some of, I suppose, the what I would say the most prestigious, but some of the largest smart building projects in Ireland and indeed the UK. We have a couple actually coming up in the US before the end of the year as well. Some of our projects include Google Boland's Quay and a couple of the buildings around there for Google. And we work with the likes of MasterCard and AIB as well. And I suppose we're a little bit unique in our offering because we offer services from design assist at the start of a project right through to install and project management. And we also develop our own software and middleware as well. And we've developed our own smart building SaaS platform called Hereworks Happy, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. When Alan asked me to speak here today about the adoption of smart digital technologies to collate real-time data, it actually got me thinking, and I actually rang Alan on Friday when I was thinking more about the audience, the fact that it's for SMEs as well, and the fact that it's for the construction industry. I was thinking to myself, well, do I talk about the process, our process, or do I talk about our finished product? In other words, do I talk about the construction phase or the post-occupancy phase of what we do? And then it occurred to me, actually, do people actually even know what we do? So, or what's best practice when it comes to intelligent buildings? And so what I decided to do instead was tell a story about, I suppose, what an MSI is and some insights we've learned along the way and how we've come full circle. And indeed, some of the stuff I'll talk about today, a lot of it is relating to large commercial buildings, but equally the learnings that we've come across could be applied to smaller projects and indeed to retrofit projects as well. Which might fall more into the SME category as well. And firstly, and maybe this interaction won't go as well as I originally thought, but who has heard the term Master Systems Integrator before? Okay, so we've four people, right? Who could describe it? Like 2, 3, okay, right. What about a digital building consultant? Yeah. Okay. So that's more a recognised term. And what about something like a data layer? Okay. So we're getting there. So when I looked again at the topic, I actually said, right, adoption of smart digital technologies to collate real-time data, and I realised by changing about 2 words, I could actually describe what an MSI does, and that is an MSI adopts and integrates smart building technologies to collate real-time data. But in essence, actually, what an MSI is a new breed of contractor on a modern intelligent building contract. So much like they're part of the construction team, in other words. So they're part of the team that's actually going to construct or renovate that building. And its core function, and this is quite a mouthful, and I'll ask you to remember this now, is to ensure that all systems within a building communicate flawlessly with one another, that their data is made accessible and usable for building optimization and the well-being of its occupants. MSIs develop software layers responsible for integration, aggregation, and communication of the building's systems. So that's it in a nutshell. But all this happens in what I just referred to, the data layer. So all that integration happens in what we call the data layer, and I'll expand on that in a minute. And then all the data that comes from the various building systems gets sent to a data lake. What an MSI is one thing, right? But what actually is a smart building? A smart building is a building that's full of tech, right? That seems to be the general consensus or definition at the moment. And when people ask and say they have a smart building, that seems to be what they mean. But where does intelligence actually come into it? And I suppose I'd compare a smart building versus an intelligent building akin to my friend here, He's got a very high IQ, but he's no common sense. And in fact, he's ignoring the information that's right in front of him. And a smart building has loads of data all over the place. But there's no knowledge, no learning. All of these sensors and the inputs that we have from the building, but we're learning nothing from them. And I spoke to a real estate director of a very large multinational who has just opened their new offices in Dublin, and this was actually during the construction phase. And he came to me and he was actually panicking about the aesthetics of the amount of sensors and equipment that was going into his meeting rooms and his boardrooms. But kind of wall acne, for want of a better word. But when we discussed it a little more, we discovered there was an even a bigger problem. And John talked about this term earlier. What would be the single source of truth for all the sensors in that particular room? For all this real-time data, what was going to be the single source of truth? And the reality was there was none. They had no digital building consultant. They had a myriad of other consultants. He had never heard of the term MSI at the time, and the sensors that had been suggested, the sensors that have gone into these meeting rooms have been suggested by a combination of the electrical contractor, the mechanical consultant, the audiovisual people, the IT people, BMS contractor. And all these systems are now in the building. The building's actually open now. And all the systems work perfectly fine in their own silos. But there was duplication everywhere, and there was no way to compare apples with apples. Or I know, Claire, you used the term, is it a goose or is it a duck? Yeah. Right? So there was no way to compare, say, the usage of the AV equipment, which produced data, with the occupancy sensors from the lighting. And actually, worse than this, in some of the rooms, there was an occupancy sensor for the lighting, and there was an occupancy sensor for the AV control. And despite that, there was actually no way of counting how many people were in the room. We could tell if the room was occupied or not, but there was no way of actually analysing utilisation for that room. While ironically, actually, underneath a lot of the screens was a little camera that actually had an API that could count people in the rooms, and that wasn't utilised. And even thinking more practically for them, they had a desk booking system, so a hot desk booking system, and they had a BMS system, which most buildings do. But those two systems use completely different naming scheme for rooms and areas. So that made it completely impossible to compare, say, energy usage to occupancy, or to suggest maybe shutting down part of the hot desk areas to save energy when desk booking is predicted to be low. As well as that, any new system that was going into that building that needed to integrate with an existing system would require a whole piece of bespoke integration. And that would need to happen for every new system that went into that building over the next 20, maybe 30 years. So that's exactly where an MSI, or a Master Systems Integrator, comes in. I'm going to get a little bit technical now, but not too technical. I want to outline what we'd call the Hereworks Intelligent Building Stack. And I'm going to superimpose it on this building here, which looks quite faded here, actually. But I'm just want to emphasize a point by doing it this way. And the first building block of any building is the foundations. And the foundations are essentially the data layer of the intelligent building. And much like a physical building, if we get the foundations right from the start, we'll ensure the longevity of the intelligent building. And every building system, I suppose, really starting with the BMS, because there's a BMS in every commercial building, but every system should connect to the data layer. And that means conforming to a data structure, which can evolve and develop over time, and that's what we call the ontology. So you can see these terms coming in now. The data layer and the ontology is that structure of which the data conforms to. Our preferred ontology at the moment, at least, is the Google Digital Buildings ontology. We just like the open source nature of it. We actually contribute to the development of it. It's open source, and it's always evolving. A couple of the other ones out there would be like the Brick Schema or Project Haystack, and there's others. But another part of the data layer is the naming scheme. And remember the client I spoke about a minute ago. To a human, Room 101 and RM 101 or R 101, yeah, they're the same thing, it's Room 101. But to software system, they are completely different entities. But you can see how, say, a BMS contractor or somebody configuring a BMS can come in and go, right, that's Room 101, I'm going to say RM 101, and that's what I'm going to name all my rooms. And then the lighting guy comes in and does something he uses, R 101 or Room 101. So the data layer there, that's essentially what the MSI is there to create in the first instance, to protect it, to maintain it, and develop it over the life cycle of the building. And make the information in there available to any other systems that might require it over the lifetime of the building. Importantly, this data layer should not be a means to an end, and there should not be, we've seen sometimes when there's multiple data layers because they're saying, oh, well, that system will never need to speak to that system. So you've got these preconceived activities or silos. But they could be completely different in 5 years' time. They will be completely different in 5 years' time. So the MSI will take responsibility for any data that comes from any building system. That doesn't mean that they've necessarily provided it, but ultimately any system that produces data should conform or connect to that data layer, or be ready to connect to it. Should have considered it at very least. And any subsystem provider or specialist subcontractor that's working on that job has a responsibility to conform to that data model and indeed work with the MSI to get the data in. So to continue the model, we also have use cases. So use cases are essentially, what is the building going to be used for? If I was an occupant in the building or as a user of the building, what might I actually want to do? So here's some common ones. I might want to get into the building, I want to get access. I might want to order lunch, I might want to rent a locker, I might want to book a meeting room, book a hot desk, or if I'm a facility manager or building manager, I might want to reduce energy or reduce the number of faults in the building. So they're all things that the building users may want to do. And then finally we have open devices and systems. And whoop, I've gone wrong. Yeah, okay. And if you've seen this kind of stack before, you might say that's a slightly different setup to others. A lot of people call it the horizontal architecture. Horizontal meaning that basically everything is connected rather than everything being in vertical silos. But we draw it slightly differently because often when we see this in other slide decks, we think of devices before the use cases. And that's the wrong way around. Yes, there are some devices that, are essential, like your HVAC system, like your lights in the building. And then I'd argue that there are some, I would say that are essential if you're considering an intelligent building project, that you must put in things like space analytics. But there's some that are really dependent on the use cases, like smart lockers, like hot desk booking systems, like coffee machines. In any case, any system or hardware that's decided to go into the building should have its data handled by the MSI. The hardware and systems, I suppose, are connected to a network layer, and they're connected to the data layer via an API. And actually, security is a big, huge piece here as well, because there's been a lot of talk about IoT so far today, and really, like IoT and sensors, it is the wild west of smart buildings. So security is a huge thing. Like if you're going to put these devices on your network, are they secure? Where's the data going? And again, that's where an MSI can help as well. And then finally, the data is stored in the data lake to be retrieved by any system, any vendor. So just to recap on the terms really quickly, we have the data layer at the bottom, we have the use cases, and then we have the open and secure devices. So where does Hereworks or where does a typical MSI play? Well, Hereworks, a typical MSI will really look after that, maintain that data layer, create it and maintain it. And then Hereworks will work together with a digital building consultant to help develop or design assist the use cases. But ultimately, the role there will be to pick actually the technologies that are going to help deliver those use cases. So what software, what hardware are going to help, and that should be done during the design phase. And then finally, Hereworks will manage the data coming from all these subsystems and indeed write any APIs or middleware required for the use cases. And we'll project manage that as well. So getting back to my title, which was Real Insights, what are the real insights we've learned along the way? What is a day in the life of a Hereworks smart building? Well, I suppose, again, the main thing is, and I think John touched on this as well, we're really at the cutting edge of this. Like, we're really at the beginning of a journey here. We're still learning, our software is still learning, our clients are learning, and the construction industry is learning. And a big piece of what we do is around education, around talking about best practice, researching, and I think it's going to be a wild ride for the next couple of years. But there's a couple of key themes that, if I look back on projects we've done over the last 18 months, that recur all the time. Claire introduced me and touched on this. And if you hang around with me for longer than 20 minutes, you'll hear me talking about, if we focus on the human, we'll get everything else right. But it's true. Obviously, if we focus on the human, we're going to keep them comfortable. We're going to make sure they're healthy. So we're going to get our staff well-being and happiness. And the knock-on effect of that is that all the research shows that if we really look after our staff well-being, if we can help create inspired employees, that we will have multiple increases in productivity. And it's not actually a small increase, it's massive. While the opposite is true, if we focus on productivity, we'll actually decrease staff well-being. So moving on then to CO2 emissions, if we're focused on the human in the building, so if we're looking at human-related data in the building, so space occupancy systems, actually utilization, what do humans do within the building? Well, then we're going to use that information to design more appropriately sized spaces. We're also going to only provide resources where it's required. So again, if it's a quiet day, can we ramp down the HVAC system? What other services can we switch off? And then reduce waste. A lot, actually, big focus on food waste at the moment in smart buildings. Two of the projects we're involved in, we're APIing with food systems, and it's basically to reduce waste. Again, linking that to space analytic systems and other systems within the building. But also, the other place we can save on waste is in maintenance. So by observing humans, we can reduce cleaning rotas. We can move to predictive maintenance on plant as well. This statement seems maybe obvious, but it's actually, I think, a core principle we should live by. And all clients agree with this at the start of a project at the very least, and then sometimes we get distracted by shiny things and forget this core principle. But our view is that an occupant's interaction with the building should be seamless. It should be light touch, and it should be almost invisible. Because after all, it's the building itself that's there to look after the occupant. In fact, it's the only reason the building exists is to house the humans in it. So it's not the other way around. The people shouldn't have to look after the building. What am I getting at here? I'm talking here about smart building apps. And I see this a lot. It's like a one-stop shop. It's like an app. It's like a smart building app. And the idea is that it wakes you up in the morning and it tells you how to get to work, and then you get to the speed lanes and you open it up and you tap it to get into the building, and then you turn on the lights on it, and then you turn the air conditioning on it, and then maybe you book a desk. And they're front and centre of every single tender I come across for smart buildings, or when we get to an interview stage, let's talk about the app. And a lot of the time they contradict this principle, because in an ideal world, the building would instinctively know what the end user wanted. And while we're not there 100%, we're not far off it. So users should definitely not be tethered to one of these occupants app to engage with every aspect of the building. And you certainly shouldn't design your smart building around a particular app. And actually, when I was speaking earlier about the data layer, and I say a data layer shouldn't be a means to an end, that's exactly what I'm talking about here. You don't design your data layer around a particular app. It should be completely agnostic. It's very hard to get people to install apps anyway, unless they're really, really useful, they're really, really good. Kieran will know this, and they're kept up to date. And they're, but whatever way you look at it, from a smart building perspective, less is more. We definitely don't want to be asking users to do more stuff in a smart building. And actually, if we concentrate on building that efficient data layer, the more chance we have of making that seamless experience. The other thing we've learned is that people skills are just as important as technical skills because of the infancy of what we're doing here. We're working on large projects, we're working with the likes of Joneses and Mercury and people like that. They're really good at what they do. They're around years, they're a lot bigger than us. And you're now asking them to conform to a data model. They now have a responsibility to send data to an MSI. So you've got to tell the story and you've got to bring them on a journey. And I think that's probably where Hereworks is a bit unique, because we're from a main contracting background. We understand the pressures of delivering a modern building. The other big one is early engagement. Every single project every single problem we've come across on smart building projects has either been because the MSI has been appointed late, or we've observed that no MSI has been appointed at all. An MSI should really be appointed at stage 3, I would say, maybe even earlier, but definitely before the main contractor or the specialist subcontractors are appointed. Because those contractors, like I said earlier, they need to understand their responsibilities towards the data layer. And if they don't, if that hasn't been spelled out or that hasn't been designed right, well then the client's going to get themselves into trouble, because it's going to lead to extra claims as well. But also you need the time to plan that. So it's crucial. It's a foundation of the building. You wouldn't appoint your structural engineer at stage 4 or 5. So how do we come full circle on real insights from an intelligent building? Look, it's the data lake and all the rich normalized data from the building systems, coupled with the rich data from the building occupants in the same data lake, where we truly start to see insights from an intelligent building. Because now we know that this is room 101, we know that that's a temperature sensor. It's reporting in degrees Celsius. We know the timestamp. We also know the timestamp of the space analytics system. As we walked into the room, we can start to see correlations between different things. So with that in mind, we developed our own platform for smart buildings called the Hereworks Happy Platform, and that connects to all the data in the data layer or in the data lake. It's available on web and mobile, but it's, I suppose, like a single pane of glass for the live and historical views of the building. And remember, a dashboard is not an insight. An insight should be actionable. So we're using anomaly detection to see correlations and things that are not the norm, and we bring these to the attention of building managers. We couple this with machine learning then to actually predict what tomorrow might bring. And we can import all kinds of data into this building. We do try and fit them into these 8 categories on the left. But again, we make all of them available in the platform. Here's a few screenshots. I don't have time to get into much about it, but I have a whole deck on the type of insight, real insights we've seen where we've deployed this as well. So happy to talk about them another time. If you were to remember 3 things from me today, engage in MSI early. Early engagement is really, really key. Get the foundations right, and don't be distracted by shiny things. They can follow, because if we get the foundations right, we can layer on anything on in the future, and of course focus on the human. So that's me, Claire. Thank you very much, and yeah.